What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Barbara Nickless. We're talking about her book, The Drowning Game. That book is available now. I was actually really familiar with Barbara's work, her Sydney Rose Parnell series that she worked on several years ago. I was really familiar with it. I read all of those books and I really enjoyed it. So I was really excited for the opportunity to read the book and to talk to Barbara about her work. And I really enjoyed learning about her experience as an author and how she was moving from a series to a standalone and the research that she did. And then we kind of got off topic, talking about, just reading in general, books in general, and reader spaces versus author spaces. But either way, I'll let you guys get to it. Here is Barbara. So today we've got Barbara Nickless. We're talking about her book, The Drowning Game. That book is available on January 1st. Barbara, thank you so much for joining me today. I have read the Sydney Rose Parnell series. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed Sydney and all her dangerous and exciting escapades that she had going on there. So I was really excited to get another title from you, and so I'm excited to dig a little bit deeper today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really happy to be here and thanks for reading my books.
Yeah, absolutely. So to get started, can you share like a summary of the book so that people can follow along with the conversation?
Sure. So the book has two sisters. They're the heirs to a yacht building company, family owned company called Ocean House. And their family has been building super yachts for the rich and famous for decades. But there's a lot more competition now. And so they're pushing into the Asian market to try and find clients there. And then one of the sisters falls or is pushed or jumps from the 40th floor window of the famous hotel in Singapore, the Marina Bay Sands. And the surviving sister, Nadia, finds out that Cassandra had been up to some things in Singapore and in China that were questionable. So she starts digging to find out the true story.
Yeah, in a nutshell, and all the sorts of secrets, and she's uncovering truths. And as a reader, I was like, wait a second. Because I was like, we're following along. I think I noticed the differences when some authors write suspense or thrillers. Is the reader finding out the truth along with the character, or do we see what goes on first and then she's got to catch up? Nadia, our character, has to catch up. So it's interesting because I was like, wait a second. Because it was like, because I thought as a reader, I thought like I had a hunch. I thought I had a, but then as we're getting more details and we're following the clues with Nadia, and we're discovering there's so much under the surface, and it goes, way past just her like a bubble of her and her family's company. And it's just, it was really interesting. It was a lot of cool stuff going on. So can you share your background a little bit? Like we said, I familiar with your previous works and what led you to bring out this new title, Next Up to the World?
Sure. My background's in English literature, but I'm intensely curious about a lot of different things. And so I started writing police procedurals because I loved the forensic aspect of it, the science of it, and more the not so much who done it, but why done it. Why did
Mm.
this person decide to kill? I was fascinated with the psychology. And lately, just the world has gotten so crazy all around the globe. And I think that's into the espionage angle because I would read the headlines and see decisions that diplomats are making or politicians are making and wonder where that was coming from. What was below the surface, that part of the iceberg that we weren't seeing that was driving their actions? And that led into this whole very cool subterranean world of human intelligence.
Yeah, I kind of want to get into that too, piggybacking off of that, because there's a lot. I from at least from your Sydney Rose Purnell series, a lot of that was very local. Aside from like her situation was very local, the crimes that she was solving was very local. Aside from maybe her history while she was serving in the military, and so I thought that was really interesting. How it's been a long time since I've read your other series, so I thought this one was really cool was that it just branched out like internationally, and there's so many different governing bodies and their motivations, and what they seem illegal and how tight they crack down on things like that. And it's not easy to be sneaky over there because it's everybody's, it's, you never know who's watching. And unfortunately, Nadia kind of gets like a crash course and rude awakening for that. It just when she's just trying to figure out what happened to what was going on, why her sister was doing the things that she was doing. And so I want to like piggyback off of the research. I imagine you approach this maybe a little bit differently, or how did you approach it differently than your other works when you research for your other titles? And was there any like anything super fascinating or surprising that you learned?
I think the process is the same, which is, first of all, you have to understand structurally how things work. With the Sidney Parnell series, I had to understand police procedure and how forensics works and how crime scenes were processed. With this book going into espionage, I really needed to talk to people in intelligence. And fortunately, I had a few connections, and it's just like networking in any other field. This person introduces you to that person, introduces you
Yeah.
to that person. And I did get to someone who had retired from the CIA and pitched my thoughts. And this person said, "Oh, totally. Yeah, that's completely believable." And we threw a lot of stuff back and forth as I worked through how this would actually play out. I I didn't necessarily know the direction it was going to go in. I chose China and East Asia because I wanted the super yacht world. And that came from reading an article in the New Yorker by Evan Osmus called The Haves and the Have Yachts. And that
Mm,
was my first introduction to these ultra high net worth individuals and what their lives are like. And my sisters, they are not themselves wealthy, but they have to be able to play the game and put on the facade and act the part when they're working with these very wealthy people. I didn't want to do Russian oligarchs, even though at the time we were hearing all the time about their super yachts that had been impounded and taken over by different governments. I wanted to go in a different direction, and so China really made sense for that because they've been causing a lot of problems in the geopolitical
mm,
world, and it's not
mm,
over.
yeah, I thought that was really interesting how some of the things that you pointed out, while Nadia, she took it upon herself to research like the current climate and political climate and international relations between countries like over territories and stuff like that. So I thought it was really cool how through Nadia, like you're, yeah, if, well, her character was basically, she learned that World War III is probably going to be caused by any type of like toe stepping or rash decision making like that's brewing possibly now like over in the Pacific, just from over I think China and Taiwan and those international waters and all that stuff. And so as I'm not like super current on with the country, I try my best to stay healthily aware. So I
That
just
word
don't, I want to know what's
healthily.
going. Yeah, exactly. I want to know what's going on. I don't want to, I want to be somewhat informed, but I also don't want to get sucked too far down because then that's when things get depressing and hopeless a little bit. But for like internationally, there's, I just realized that there's just so much going on and there's so much that has been in place for decades. Tension and conflicts that has just been in play forever. So I think there's just one of the things where I enjoyed reading books that were here and there, even if it's just like a little bit. I like feeling like smarter when I'm finished reading them. So even
Same.
like little tidbit, yeah, even little tidbits through Nadia's character, I found that really interesting, where you allow the reader, you engage the reader in familiar, currently like current events, relatable points, or relevant points, I should say, and how even a company that is building mega yachts, super yachts for international clients, it's, yeah, this is definitely stuff that they would have to be aware of and they would have to deal with and might inadvertently find themselves dealing with, whether or not they want to just like, hey, I'm just here to build your boat. I don't need to know where, it's none of my business what you're going to do with the product after it's done. And it's just, you gotta like, you gotta figure it out. And you gotta, I just felt, I've never read a book where uh, the main character's family, they were like building, they built yachts for, so I thought that was just such a cool dimension, like another layer that you had to dig into because of all the implications, and it involves a major plot point obviously for the story. So I just thought it was really cool and how much deeper, I can't imagine like how many tabs you had open, how many post-it notes you had going around just trying to figure out everything and organize everything.
Yeah, I warned my family through this process. I'm sorry, I'm coming down with a novel. because so much of my central processing unit, my brain is absolutely absorbed with that and trying to juggle a lot. So the consequences of that are the stove gets left on, or it's a good thing
Yeah.
I don't have little kids anymore. I'd forget to pick them up.
Right.
I, it's like, it's so all consuming. I'll make spaghetti without the noodles. It's just
Oh
crazy.
no.
Yeah.
So what's this pot of boiling water doing here?
Yeah,
It's funny
exactly.
that you mentioned that because I have forgotten to pick up my kid or drop them off at school because I was reading. I was just got I just, "Oh, I have some time," and then before I know it, it's, "Oh, crap." I have to run and tell my kids, "I'm sorry, sorry, honey."
Probably
Like,
laugh at you.
they do. They see me reading all the time, and my 7-year-old, he's in 2nd grade, and he's, "Mommy, you're just obsessed with books." I'm like, "Okay, there are worse things, okay?" Like
Totally.
I'm like, "Books are fun. Books are amazing. Why don't come on with it. Get with it, buddy. Let's go." Like he just needs to like it's funny because I'm like, "Okay, am I not engaged with my kids?" But then it's like when I get excited when they do find books that they like, and then I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, let's go." Yeah. I think it's just I think I remember my son, he was like a few years younger. He was like, "Mommy, I'm sorry. I don't like reading that much." And my heart like broke.
I
But
know.
then sometime later, because he's, like, into Pokemon and stuff, so sometime later, he was, like, able to find books that he really enjoyed, so I was like, "Okay, that makes sense." Like, he just needed to find something like character books or Pokemon the comic books, or there's some other kids' books that he's becoming more familiar with, so he gets excited about those, so that's yeah, it was just, like, a thing, I'm
Yeah.
like, "Mommy, you're obsessed with books," and I'm like, "You know what? There are worse things
Yeah.
for your parent to be
Well, and
obsessed
it's
with,
I think it's
okay?"
hard. You're right, you have to find the right book for your kids, and I've been told it's harder to find books for boys, at least when my kids were growing up. I don't know if that's still true. So
Mm.
when my son started reading Captain Underpants, I was thrilled.
Yeah,
Like totally anything. Whatever you want to read.
exactly. Yeah, mine, he's on the Dogman series, which I think is by the same creator
Oh,
of the
okay.
Underpants. Yeah, so that's it's just funny because I think there's a movie coming out soon too, and I'm even like it's funny because the backstory is morbid, but it's just whatever. Like kids, they can understand it, and because it's basically like this policeman and his canine unit were in like a bomb explosion, and they tried to save them both. They weren't going to make it, but there were parts, so they just combined the parts of their bodies that were still
Oh,
functional. So
oh, that's so creative.
it's yeah. Those dog man. It's like a regular human with a dog head, and he still acts like a dog.
Oh,
Where
that's sort
he
of
play.
Egyptian, isn't it? The god, there's a dog-headed
Yeah,
god,
I
or
think
yeah, or Jack.
yeah, that no, exactly, I know what you're talking about. It's just really funny because he'll chew on furniture sometimes. He's, "No, dog man, go we got a call, go get"
Ah, well,
so it's yeah, it's funny, like, reading them with the kids and then the movie's coming out, so I'm like, "No, that's something that's, like, kinda goofy that I can get excited with them." But yeah, it's funny, like,
yeah,
what intrigues them, but it's like, "Hey, anything that can get them flipping the page."
that's it. Whatever it
Yeah,
is. It
yeah,
was
that's
my mom's friends were embarrassed she let me read comic books, but Archie, and then the horror. I loved the horror comic books, but it was reading. It was still
Mhm,
reading, and that certainly
mhm.
led to bigger things.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Just if your mom could like you could be like, "I told you so. See, it's
Yeah,
okay." So let's see here. So you've got I talked about this a little bit earlier about like your experiences like writing your previous books because you've got another series out besides the Sydney Rose Parnell, right?
I
Do you
do.
have a yeah. So do you how would you compare like your previous experiences with releasing this one? Because I'm guessing the Drowning game, that's like a standalone, right? It's not like a part of a new series or anything, or
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's a
So how did
standalone.
yeah, so I want to explore like how those experiences differed from between the series, like what led you to jump to standalone projects, stuff like that.
One thing, in some ways, writing a standalone is easier because I everything that comes up has to be resolved within that book. Whereas with both series, I had story arcs as well as series arcs as well as the arcs within the story that I had to be mindful of, and for the aforementioned reasons of not making pasta to go with my spaghetti, I would
Yeah.
sometimes forget that you have to have your story viable in order to keep everything straight. In that sense, doing a standalone was easier. It was also harder because I'm one of those people. One of the writers I start out with a pretty simplistic idea of what my story is going to be about, and then I, it's like going grocery shopping when I'm hungry. Ooh, that looks good. Oh, I could
Yeah.
add that. Oh, and pretty soon I've got this cart that's overflowing with, yeah, with food or ideas. And so the book quickly gets complicated, and I can't put anything off to another book the way I did with my series
Mm,
books.
mm. I could see that, yeah, because it's where with each, even if it's like a part of a series, a lot of the times you can read authors will do it where they you can read one without having to read the other ones. Like you can
Yeah.
get either get
Yeah.
caught up or each like story is its own little case or situation that will get solved. But it's you're not with the drowning game, you're not following a law enforcement specialist or you're not following a detective or anything where they're going to get multiple cases. It's like we hope that Nadia and her family aren't running into continuous like issues, right? We hope that everything's fine now by the time the story's over, that they don't have another thing to deal with that might involve like still high stakes, interpolitical, like international drama, any of that stuff. But yeah, I just think
Right.
it was like interesting how authors, yeah, sometimes they'll start with standalones, but then they'll start a series or vice versa. Well, they do a series and then they're gonna do then they start a standalone. So it's interesting to compare those experiences and how I imagine were there been any big lessons learned, stuff like that? Was there anything like that stood out to you doing a standalone versus a series?
I think what stood out for me the most is really how much I enjoyed it. I enjoyed starting with the clean slate, even though I missed my characters and missed having that substrate to work off of. I always the new and exciting thing. So it
Yeah.
was fun to, yeah, completely start from scratch and then work to see if I really could resolve everything within a reasonable page count. So I liked
Yeah.
that challenge. Yeah, yeah. I really like to challenge myself with every book to do something different, whether
Mhm.
it's the point of view or how many points of view there are, or whether I use flashbacks or not. I'm always trying to learn because that's the fun aspect of writing, I think.
Yeah, and you want to, if you're going to keep writing books, you want to keep challenging yourself for sure, like trying new things. So, no, I like it when authors are when they like they're honest about it and they allow themselves to be vulnerable. They're like, you know what, I'm going to do it, and if it doesn't work, I'll figure it out, stuff like that. And it's just it takes the time that it takes the research that it takes, but I feel you can hold your head high and be like, all right, I'm ready for the next thing. Like I'm ready. I'll do a million standalones, whatever.
You make a very good point there talking about the vulnerability, though, because if you've established a series and it's done well and your readers are expecting a certain thing from you, when you branch away from that, it's always a risk. And of course, you wonder if your readers are going to follow. So I watched were the readers going to follow me from my first series to my second series and then to the standalone. It's also interesting who I heard from as readers. So with the first series, I heard from a lot of railroad people, I heard from a lot of veterans. With the second series, it was a different group. I was hearing from a lot of English professors, lawyers, human rights activists. It was just crazy the
Mm.
different kind of crowd. And so we'll see how the Drowning Game goes. It's such early days to know who that may or may not appeal to.
Yeah, that will be interesting to see like how many professions you pull out of the woodwork from your reader base, from your audience, of who maybe somebody who's waiting for you to do an espionage or international political suspense and see who, yeah, like who, just how you mentioned people who are like your reader base who might be able to speak on that, who are in the fields and they can like, yeah, it'd be interesting to see who comes out of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully they come out positive. But at least
Yeah,
yeah,
positive feedback about it. Not, yeah.
or
I
what a
know
couple
it's because
did
I
I
always,
miss?
yeah. I don't know. I say there's like a whole. It's like a running commentary, like in book reviewers. I see like people who will review books and tag the authors if in book reviews that are not flattering. They're like not like mean, but just if you're giving me 1 or 2 stars, don't tag me in your review. Like
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
need that. It's yeah. It's why, but I just think like why do people do that? Because there are books that I read and even authors that I interview where I'm like maybe underwhelmed or didn't grab me, but I'm still like gonna have a good conversation with the author where I'm still like, no, we can still talk. There's still a bunch to talk about. It'll be fine. But I'm not gonna tag them in everything I talk about or everything I do, or even like, I don't think I even really promote anything that's like under 4 stars, under 4 or 3 stars, because it depends. Because like I'll be all over the place. I'm not gonna. look for points of suspense in a romance novel. I
Yeah,
just
all
not
right.
other than if
Although
it's like
you
a slow
see,
burn or something, yeah, it's yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So, it's I try to respect the genre, and so I do my best, but I also try to, like, respect the genre, respect the author's work and stuff like that, and also especially if I've read the author's work before, and then I get really excited, and then I'm like, "Okay, yes," and, like, maybe I'm a little biased, but I would still, like, favor it. But yeah, it's just I don't know, I don't know why people tag authors in negative reviews. I just don't understand. I'm like, why don't just don't like authors. I'm sure by now you're not. It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. It's not going to be everybody's favorite story. But at the end of the day, it's don't like that's not how you're trying to like your constructive criticism is like for the editing process, right? Like where you got your
right.
editors coming in and being like, okay, hold on a
Right.
second,
This
like
isn't
writing your
working.
little
And I
yeah.
think, yeah, that's a great point because reviews by readers really should be for other readers, not
Hmm.
so much for the author. You can learn things. Certainly, an author can learn things from their reviews if something keeps coming up. But yeah, what's the point of tagging them if it's a bad review? Here, let me make your day for you.
I know, and then it's just and then who knows who's gonna comment on it and stuff. It's just it's not I don't know. I know I try to navigate the whole online book community and it can be tricky. Like usually I've found it's pretty cool and I learn a lot of things and find a lot of things too, but it is some parts are toxic and it's just like, come on. We're all like big nerds. We're all reading books. We all want to connect authors to their readers, or at least I'm just going to speak for myself. I'm like trying to find new ways. But yeah, I just remember there's just like a couple different things. But you're absolutely right. Like the reviews, reader spaces are reader spaces and author
Hmm.
spaces are author spaces. So it's, you got to respect those boundaries and we're all trying to work together. We're all
Right.
trying to
Well,
like,
yeah, you somehow don't expect that toxicity among readers. Like you said, we're all book nerds. We have that
yeah,
in common. And I went to hear Neil deGrasse Tyson talk, and if you know who he is, he sort of took on the role of Carl Sagan, redid Cosmos. So he really speaks astrophysics to the masses. Yeah.
yeah,
And it was such joy to be in this huge filled auditorium with a bunch of science nerds.
yeah,
You just have instant camaraderie,
yeah.
plus a lot of inside jokes.
And
Whereas, yeah,
it is a little niche too. It's like a little
hmm,
specific pocket
true.
of a broader subject matter of study. It's 'cause my cousin, he did go see him speak too. My husband went with. It was, I guess, it was really funny because I guess, he wore a non-licensed Neil deGrasse Tyson T-shirt, and he
Uh-oh.
was sitting, yeah, and he was sitting like in the front row, and I guess Neil called him out on it. He's like, "Excuse me,
Ah,
that is not licensed merchandise."
awkward.
I know. I thought it was so funny. I'm like, man, like you were bold wearing that like in the front row. And I guess I'm surprised that he's got an eye for that too, where he like could
Yeah,
pinpoint, wait a second, that is
yeah,
not.
that actually shocks me.
I know, that's so funny. So we
God.
talked, you mentioned this before. What were the most challenging parts to write? What were the most enjoyable parts to write?
A lot of the challenge came from trying to understand Chinese culture and
Mm,
understand how the groups work within China, within the Chinese Communist Party. So
mm,
the Ministry of State Security is their version of the CIA. So that's their external intelligence, but they run into conflict with some of the other more internal groups because everybody's vying for you want to survive. If you're a member of the Communist Party, you want to survive and you want to come across well and you want to make an impression on the great leader. So trying to get into that and then to understand Chinese attitudes both toward each other and towards people outside that community. That was a challenge because I wanted to do it right. I wanted to be fair and honest and as truthful as I
yeah.
possibly could. And fortunately, one of my intelligence experts, his specialty is China, and so he was able
Oh, good.
to that piece of it. I worried about the yachts. Would I get anything? What's I don't know how these engines work. It's
Yeah.
all Greek to me. So that's where I started. I started with the yachts, trying to understand both the mechanics of building a yacht and the whole business, then segued into understanding China, then Singapore because that's where it's set, and then the CIA because they come into play in this story as well. So I just went right down the road trying to learn as much as I could
Mm,
about each aspect and
yeah.
then try to figure out how my characters would respond to all of that.
Yeah. Should be a tricky line in and of itself. What about the most enjoyable parts?
Same. The most enjoyable part would have been if I could have actually gotten on a super yacht. And I came
Okay, yeah.
close, but I couldn't quite pull it off. And until I started researching this, I grew up in Colorado. I was born on an island, but I grew up in Colorado. I'm not a water baby. But
Mm,
after doing this research, it would be nice to have a floating palace.
right.
I could get into that and go anywhere you wanted to go, and especially with these explorer yachts like I have in the Drowning Game. Yeah, just learning how the top 1% of the top 1% live was really
Yeah.
interesting and
Yeah.
fun.
I think I've never been on a yacht either, so no worries. I lived a little vicariously through Nadia there. Yeah, no, it is crazy because I didn't realize like the vast undertaking that it could be, and especially how like competitive I guess it could be, and also semi-customizable. That term was thrown around a little bit, and how the implication is of that. I'm assuming it speeds up the project, the timeline if you don't have to customize every single thing, but it's also less like luxurious or it's less novel, right? I guess it's like
Mm-hmm.
kind of what I'm
We
getting
see the
from
same
that.
thing in houses, right? Whether you're going to do a fully custom house or if you're going to go with semi-custom and finish out the details you want. So it's similar to that. It's just on a multi-million dollar scale.
Tricky for you and other authors to do is to like include just enough detail and lingo to make it authentic, but
Mm,
also you don't want to have the readers lose the engagement. You don't want to have their brains glaze over and just feel
right.
like, yeah, wait a second, there's a lot of terminology in here that I don't know if I need it for the rest of the
Yeah,
book or
yeah,
whatever.
for
Yeah.
sure that's tricky. And I've paid attention to how other authors have done that because you really want to avoid that whole Bob. CIA stands for the Central
Yeah.
Intelligence Agency.
Yeah.
It is really tricky because you definitely, and I'm going to use a bad pun here given my book, but you don't want to leave your readers at sea. You don't want
Mhm.
them ever confused, but you also don't want your characters speaking in a way that's just ludicrous. I'm glad you raised that point because that's a really tough line to walk.
Yeah, just a dialogue in general, but yeah, absolutely. We're okay, how much does the character know, and how do you organically bring that up to
Mm-hmm.
inform the reader and keep them up to speed? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
especially with the complex ideas you have going on in your book, I can imagine. Let's see here. All right. I'm gonna throw this one at you. What advice do you have for Nadia?
What advice do I have for her at what point in the
Mm.
story?
Um, I guess I know authors would ask that because then I don't want to spoil the book by giving her advice, but then if she listened to me at the beginning of the book wouldn't happen.
Uh,
So
well, would she
I guess
listen to me at the
do your
beginning of the
best to
book?
be spoiler free. Yeah, to give her like by the end of the book, what advice would you give to her?
I would just say, girl, you got to pull up your big girl panties and deal. I know you're scared. I kept imagining how I would be in that situation. It's always
Yeah.
fascinating to me, ordinary people getting sucked up into things that are much bigger than they ever realized or thought that they would have to deal with, and the desire to just run home and hide under the bed until it all
Yeah.
goes away is,
Yeah.
is totally relatable. And with a character, of course, that's the debate. If you're talking about Blake Snyder's beats, you can't have the debate go on for too long. But sometimes, if it's Jack Reacher, he's not going to have a debate, right?
Yeah.
He's going to do what has to be done.
Yeah.
But somebody who's more like the rest of us, it's going to be a bit more of a struggle as to how much to step up. And especially if stepping up might put something else of value in risk at risk. We all have to
Yeah,
step up to
I love
life's
that.
challenges.
Absolutely, because I love how you point that out with Nadia. It was just like she's smart and she's obviously educated and she's business savvy and she knows how to like interact with high profile clientele, multimillionaires and all that. But you're right, she doesn't have any like her training only goes so far. Like she's not an investigator, a
Mm-hmm.
detective. She's not a spy. She's not so
Right.
it's like yeah, so it's a great point that you make about her, like, she could figure it out along the way, but she has very little familiarity with the real skill set that it would help her make better decisions more efficiently, make more quickly, because she's constantly, like, questioning herself, and she's constantly, like, going back and forth a bit. I don't know if I wanna do this. I don't know if I need to do this, and what I just let so and so take care of it, and I don't need to be here, and I'm just here to do this and be on my
Mm-hmm.
ways. But then like, the more she learns, the more she's, oh, okay, then what's gonna happen to this if I'm not gonna continue what my
Right.
sister started. Yeah, it's just like what happens now. And
Right. And how do you
it's
live
more
with
like
yourself?
external and internal conflict for sure. Mhm.
Yeah, as I said, that's always fascinated me. Who are the people who do find whatever's inside to step up? Because I think most of us, we just want to go about our normal lives.
Yeah.
If only life would allow for that.
Right? If only.
Yeah.
I know. I it's so funny, the statement, like, the comparison you make about, "Oh, just going and running under my bed until it's all over." That's kind of me. I'm just like, I'm like, "Nope, yeah, exactly." I'm, like, shameless into admitting that. I don't have many I was joking with a fantasy author about how, "Oh, I would love to go into this environment, the setting of my favorite fantasy book, but I don't think I'd last a week. I would
Yeah.
last, like, a day because I have limited survival skills. I'm in marketing. I'm not like in
Yeah.
if I was thrown into a similar situation, I would be the same way. I'm not qualified for this. I am probably gonna mess everything up and expose everybody, and it's just gonna be, like, my fault, honestly.
Yeah.
So, like, I have very little confidence when it comes to subterfuge or, like, being sneaky, or the only advantage I have, I would think, is, maybe going unnoticed, like, that's maybe about I can't even
If you can. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
and, like
always figured I would be the one that shows up in the red shirt, goes, "Wait, what?" and then gone.
"Wait, nobody's supposed to be paying attention to me, just go about your business,
Yeah,
don't."
yeah, not really here.
Yeah.
Oh, that's too funny. Yeah. I used to the same thing. I wanted to go into these worlds and I thought it's uncomfortable what some of these
Mhm.
people are going through.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, maybe
I
not.
know. Just like in the Hunger Games, like, that's the first example I
Yes.
could think of. It's
Yes.
just
Yeah,
I
no.
would unfortunately, nope.
Yeah, if
I
I
would,
had
like
been Katniss, I'd be like, "Sorry, sister. You'll be
I know.
fine."
Exactly, right? It's like, just hide and scavenge, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
would, like, probably be the least exciting candidate ever because I would just, like
She
I would just be,
hasn't
like,
left her
biding my
cave
time.
yet.
Yeah, pretty much. They were putting in overtime to flush me out for sure, and that
Yes.
I would just be making all sorts of horrible choices and not last very long. It's just yeah, it's just funny. It's like a running joke also amongst the book community too, I think. Same with romances. Oh, we got all these swoony book boyfriends, but
Hmm.
if any of them approached you in real life, you'd probably run away. Just from some of the things that they say or do, you'd be like in real life, you'd be like, I don't that might be a red flag. It's
Yeah.
so you're
Kidding. Are you
oh, he's
kidding me?
obsessed. Yeah, exactly. People are like, "Oh, it's that's so sweet." It's no, in real life that would be like a little alarming, I think, or a
Totally.
little bit of a turn off. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know. That's why I was like reminds me like of Nadia, like she's way smarter than me, and even then she was like doubting herself and had second thoughts and third thoughts and all that. So I was like that was one thing I appreciated about her cuz yeah, she's admirable, but then she's also what did my sister get into and do really need to get into this? And she ends up making some choices that
And I think it's interesting the stories we tell ourselves because she'd always told herself that Cassandra was the brave one and she was the one who would take on things and have adventures and Nadia just wanted to sit back and design her boats and be left alone and very introverted and but sometimes it's the stories we tell ourselves and sometimes when we don't have a
yeah,
choice, especially we life forces us to own up to whatever we really are capable of. And that's
yeah,
so fun in
100%.
fiction. Much more fun in
Yeah.
fiction than in real life.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. It just reminds me like historical fiction too. It's a See all these I read books that are like where these characters are thrown into these situations based on real life events,
Mhm.
and I'm thinking like, I don't know how our ancestors did that, some of the things that they did and blah blah blah, but then it's these people did because they didn't have a choice, and I'm like, I guess it's something to consider. Like echoing off of what you said
Mhm.
is just where we're thrown into these situations where we have to figure it out and we surprise ourselves, but then I don't know. To me, it just seems like how do humans survive? Even just like going to another country,
Yeah.
fleeing their country, going to another
Yeah.
country. They don't know anybody. They don't know the
Oh
language. They don't
gosh,
have a
yes.
job. It's yeah.
I
So
can't
stuff
even
like that just
imagine.
would terrify me.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and they do it because they don't have a choice. I Years ago I read The True Story of Kon-Tiki, which was Thor Heyerdahl wanted to he hoped to prove that humans had gone from South America to Easter Island and gone in that direction rather than coming from Asia. And so he built a
Mm.
raft called Kon-Tiki out of reeds. And so the whole thing started with conceiving of the boat and then coming up with funding. And it was unbelievable the hurdles that he had to come over to get the boat built and launched. Then
Oh
to
wow.
survive the voyage against this open Pacific Ocean. And as I'm reading that book, I'm thinking, yeah, I would have quit there. Definitely would have quit there.
Yeah.
Nope,
Yeah.
I'm totally out now. I was filled with awe that he conceived of and pursued this project to the end. It was amazing.
That's wild. I know that's another irrational fear is like just sailing and getting lost into open ocean.
Getting lost.
Even
Oh,
though
yes.
I would
Even
never
though,
find I don't think I would ever not I would never I'm not I don't go on adventures really. I don't think I would ever be doing anything that I would find myself in that situation, but it's still a fear, I think,
yeah,
if I had
it's
to
a
like
healthy fear.
I'm right. Like just not even knowing how to navigate, but then there's like all the creatures that are out there under the
Hmm.
surface that we don't
Hmm.
even know about. We haven't it's yeah, it is wild. I'm like, no, I like land. I'm gonna deal with my life here.
Yeah.
I don't need to go exploring or risk overcoming that because I'm good.
Yeah. I
If I'm
would.
at the beach, I'll stay on my beach. I'll stay on my chair in the sand with my book.
Uh-huh. Yes. Sometimes the ocean comes to you. That's not so good. You get one of those little rogue waves, but yeah.
Yeah, I know I just yeah, because even then it was just like my husband and I for our tenure we went to Hawaii and we spent like a beach day, but I try because he loves the water, so I was trying to spend time with him in the water, but even just the currents, even at the
Hmm.
shallow parts, it'll
Yeah.
carry you out if you're
Yeah.
not careful. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
so crazy. It's just okay, like I'm here trying to mind my own business. Never mind. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
inch back.
This is not how I want to go to Tahiti. I'd rather fly. I
Yeah.
don't want the current to take me there. Yeah.
Seriously. It's like it's beautiful. I'm gonna respect it from here.
Yeah.
Okay, so just a couple more questions before we wrap up here. What's next for you? Are you working on anything that you could talk about?
Yes, I'm going a bit back to my roots. So I'm starting a new series with a serial killer and an FBI agent. And I'll leave it at that.
Cool. Nice. Yes, I was like, I always love those suspense thrillers. They pull me along. When they're done, it's like when they're done well too, it's just like, let's go. Let's like get sucked in. Before I
Yeah.
know it, I'm done. And yeah, I like it. It's just like if it's a good storytelling, if it pulls you along. Yeah, because I just compare to other genres, and I'm like, the more I read, the more I'm like learning about what I really prefer on any day. If I could only read two or three genres for the rest of my life, I'm like learning how. Because for a while I would just do whatever, but now I'm like I want to respect my time as a reader. I
Yeah.
don't because
Yeah.
otherwise, yeah, there's stuff that I do for this, but then there's the whole. I don't know if you're familiar with Brandon Sanderson.
Hmm.
I just got into his like Stormlight series and I'm doing audiobooks, but those books are like over 45 hours long. And
Oh
so
my
I am just
gosh.
like, yeah, and I'm just like, it takes one business week to finish one book if I'm
Mm.
listening like full time. And even,
Ah.
yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. So it's like balancing that. But now I'm like, I'm getting a good idea of I'm getting more confident in my preferences and I'm like more familiar with what I prefer and with what really draws me in and especially it's tricky with reading versus audiobook because I
Yeah.
know I'm definitely more I do better absorbing the information reading, but
Yeah.
if I'm listening, it's a little bit tricky,
Hmm.
especially with, like, high fantasy, but then you know how to pronounce the names and stuff, so
That's true. You have that. But if you're, I'm not an audio learner. I'm a visual learner,
yeah.
and and plus my brain is total monkey brain. And so I find myself having to rewind a lot if I'm trying
Yeah.
to listen to a book. Now, have you learned to give up on books? Because that's a crucial,
I've had a couple, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Because that's been hard to not
Hmm. Yeah.
finish when I'm done with it. I'm like, "I can't." But there's been a couple where I've just been like, "You know what? I just can't do this because otherwise I'm gonna be behind on
Yeah.
reviews and my interviews and stuff like that." Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
no, it is hard. It's hard. I have to allow myself. It's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Life is too short.
Yeah, it's okay to not finish. Your time is precious. Okay, so Barbara Nickless, where can we find you online and on social media?
I have a website, www.barbaranickless.com. You can find me on Facebook, Barbara Nickless Author. Instagram, I think, is the same thing, and that's mostly where I hang out. Oh, and I've started on Substack, which is a lot of fun. It's, for listeners who don't know, it's a newsletter format, but you can find, I don't care what your interest is, you can find it on there. And you can set up on there for free. So it's a great way to explore writing.
Oh, perfect. Nice. Yeah, a lot of authors have been getting into that too, so
Yeah.
that's really cool. Yeah. So it's like you gotta just try to find what works and what doesn't, especially with everything's like changing so much. It's the algorithm. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. You just gotta figure it out.
I know. It's crazy.
It is. It
Uh,
is 100%. Okay, so The Drowning Game, that book is available on January 1st. Barbara, thank you so much for speaking with me today and for letting me ramble on and getting a little bit deeper into the crazy research and all that stuff. And yeah, if and when your next book comes out, feel free to reach out. I'd love to chat with you again.
all right. Yeah, Megan, it was a lot of fun. Thank you.
And there you go. That was Barbara Nickless talking about The Drowning Game. That book is available now. Check out the show notes where you can find links to purchase the book and to find Barbara online and on social media, where you can find Cantina Book Club online and on social media. Rate, review, subscribe to all the authors and me wherever you follow and find your book reviews and book recommendations and all that good stuff. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening.